Welcome to A Billion Realities, where we explore all topics related to spirituality, psychology, and the power of the mind. And now your host, Jessica Gerlach. Have you considered starting a podcast? Looking for a way to make your business a voice of authority in an industry? Then Podcast Cadet is the solution for you. Whether starting a podcast for yourself, your brand, business, school, church, or just plain fun, Podcast Cadet is here to help you navigate the waters of the podcast industry. Specializing in one-on-one consultation and training with industry professionals in fields ranging from podcast technology and editing to distribution, monetization, and even social media strategies. Podcast Cadet tailors their services to the specific needs of you and your podcast. Do you already have a podcast and trying to find ways to engage and grow your audience? Sign up for your Podcast Cadet audit today and let us help you explore new and exciting ways to leverage your content and elevate your podcast brand to whole new levels. From consultational workshops to affordable podcast production and maintenance packages, Podcast Cadet is your one-stop shop for everything podcast related on the internet. Visit podcastcadet.com today to sign up for your consultation or training and use code REALITY20 to save 20% off your entire purchase. That website again is podcastcadet.com.
Welcome back to A Billion Realities. Today on the show, we are discussing two different women's journeys through ADHD, shining a light on certain aspects of being diagnosed with ADHD and what it means to be an Indigo. Jenna Keener and Jessica Verrill are our amazing guests today who are willing to share their personal stories to help us understand this topic a little bit better. Welcome to the show, Jessica and Jenna.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
I'm happy to have you both on today to discuss such a very important topic, in my opinion. So, first of all, so that our audience knows, where are you two joining us from? Jessica, you can start first.
Yeah, so I am Jessica Verrill, and I live in Maine.
Awesome. And what about you, Jenna?
I live in Pennsylvania.
Excellent. So today we're discussing ADHD, Indigo people, and all the different topics that are connected to that. I just really want to get your backstory first so that we know where you both are coming from. So I'd like to start with Jenna because I know that Jenna was actually diagnosed with ADHD. So can you tell us what led up to that, Jenna, and what was your experience like with that diagnosis?
So, well, leading up to that, I have a long history with pharmaceuticals for like depression and anxiety. And when I got to a point in my late 20s, early 30s, when I just wanted to get off all the medications and just kind of start fresh. And when I did remove all that stuff from my body and stuff, I started having other issues started really coming forward from, I guess the biggest thing that people noticed first was how fidgety I am. That was the doctor noticed. And that's what kind of started leading to going down this path, is that the doctor noticed his concern for how fidgety I am. And that it's hard for me to complete a thought process at times. It's hard for me to complete like a sentence, you know, I get distracted, I get diverted. So he did we did a screening and it just came back across the board. All the typical issues you would see in ADHD.
Okay. So what is some of the diagnostic criteria for that, aside from like fidgetiness and inattentiveness or losing concentration quickly?
I would say that as far as diagnostics, I don't know if you want to hear right now about the things that I struggle with the most frequently that make it obvious to me, or just the pure diagnostics of it.
Oh, definitely. Let's go into both.
Okay. Let's see. So diagnostically, restless, fidgety, I struggle to complete tasks. I'm easily distracted. I tend to pick all the skin off my fingers. My jaw is always moving like a form of bruxism. Like I can't keep my mouth still. I have trouble sleeping at night. And conversely, I have trouble staying awake during the day.
Okay. So would you say then when you were going through the process of being diagnosed, I guess you could say that it was important that it impaired your life in some way, that the things that were happening to you, they had to impair your life in some sort of way, or negatively impact your life, I should say, in order for them to diagnose? Or was it a much lighter diagnosis? Or was the criteria less severe, if you remember?
I remember, we checked all the boxes. And,
Wow.
We talked about going back to my childhood, how long I had struggled with these issues, and realizing that this had been a long-term thing with me that's just never been addressed. And
okay.
These things do take a toll and can be an impairment, but I have found that since I've opted to not do pharmaceuticals or medication, that I can somewhat be aware of my faults and try to recognize them and control them within reason.
Okay, that's amazing. I mean, great that we got your backstory. I'm going to jump over to Jessica now because she has a little bit, quite a different experience, but similar symptoms. So Jessica, can you tell us about your experience with Indigo, finding out you're an Indigo, and how does that connect with ADHD to you?
Yeah. So, I was the kid who, even though I had friends and, I actually had friends and would like kind of rotate all around like different social groups, and, was very good at making friends and making people comfortable around me. And yet I never really felt like I fit in to any of them. I was always I've always really strongly questioned everything. Like, why? Why are you telling me to do this? But why? And it wasn't, until I was older and more on my spiritual path where I started hearing about Indigo and looking into those. I was like just astonished at, like the similar traits of being really passionate about the animals and connecting strongly with animals, and being very passionate about the environment, questioning things, being very headstrong. So many of the characteristics that I had always had, sensitivity and all of that. And so that actually was really supportive of me. And I don't recall what my, high school and grade school was like as far as ADHD, but I do really recall I went to college straight out of high school, and then I took some time off and then ended up going back a little bit later. And, I was in my late 20s, and I just remember, trying to take tests and people moving around, and how distracting it was for me, how I always had to sit in the front row, or I would get super distracted and wouldn't pay attention. Like all of these symptoms started presenting or becoming more aware. And I've never been officially diagnosed, and it doesn't feel like it's something that I need to do. And I definitely think that I would be.
Right. I mean, we know ourselves, right? It's the same way, like when we know something is is up with our children, something is wrong with our children. Like, we have that instinct. It's just a knowing. And I think that we can be very aware. We don't have to officially be diagnosed to understand that we have those symptoms. So do you feel like it would have been a disadvantage to you if you were to be diagnosed with ADHD instead of finding out that, yes, I have these symptoms, but I'm going to choose to look at this like I'm just different?
That's a great question. I think that there's two different ways to look at it. Like, I think that, yes, it could have been a disadvantage to me. It could have been something that I was easily like, well, I'm just like this because, I have ADHD. And it also, depending on how it's presented, you can really look at the positive aspects of having ADHD, attention to detail, really being able to take everything in, all of these things that so many people who have this are able to say that, their perspective is much different. So I think it depends on how it's presented to you and how, where you're at, like emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. For me, I do feel like this was the right path. Really coming into my spirituality and being able to come into a lot of things. And then also, I'm of the strong belief that we don't have these things that we don't, like the flaws that we're like, okay, well, this is hard for everybody else. And so I'm going to try to change myself. So oftentimes those are some of our most beautiful gifts. And so having had like the strong spiritual foundation before making this realization, I think really helped me, because I was able to really look at it as a way of, okay, well, how can I integrate this more into my life? How can I pull these in and make them more strengths?
This is an amazing answer, and it's very revealing. So, when I was doing research about this topic, I read that one of the biggest issues, I guess you could call it, is that when someone is diagnosed, they're not told, there's no reinforcement about, well, you have ADHD, so you're probably really great at this X, Y, and Z, but here's all of your problems. So that actually can create such a disadvantage to our consciousness, our subconscious, whatever, our emotions, because then we start feeling incompetent, inadequate, or like there's something wrong with us, which creates such an increase in anxiety, in depression. So I'm going to jump back to you, Jenna, because I know that you did struggle with anxiety and depression also, but you did mention that you did have some experience with that before your diagnosis with ADHD. So what's the connection like for you with depression, anxiety, and your diagnosis?
It's tough for me to draw the line sometimes where one ends and the other begins. But before I lose my train of thought, I just want to touch on some of the stuff that Jessica said, because it really hit me.
Absolutely.
The positives. We don't talk enough about the positives. Excuse me. And when you embrace this and you start to integrate it into your life, and you feel the positives and stuff, it doesn't feel like such an impairment. There are daily struggles. I struggle hard with my concept of time. I don't have concept of time. So that's tough. But on the other hand, like, I can learn to play music. I can learn to play any song in no time. I can, I have so many skills, and my brain works different than other people. So I'm fortunate with my problem solving skills. And when I look at that stuff, I say, like, maybe my time management skills aren't that important for the other skills that I gain from this.
Love that.
And also something is that I feel emotions. My emotions are heightened. I feel emotions a lot stronger than most people do, I think. So that's maybe a bad thing for wrong people, but that's definitely a good thing when I'm around the right people.
I agree. I agree. That's amazing. So I feel like it's so important right now to shine a light on the fact that the positives are not focused on enough. Like we need to change the way that people are being diagnosed. You know what I mean? Like if I tell you, well, you must have ADHD because here's all the things that are quote unquote wrong with you. But like Jenna and you were, and Jessica, you were both saying, what about all of the things that are heightened because of this difference in your brain chemistry, you know? And I just feel like so far from what I'm hearing is that if people were more encouraged with it, they wouldn't feel so bad about themselves. I'll give you an example. You know, I know a guy who's extremely successful now. He's a wonderful person. He's just an incredible human being. He was diagnosed with ADHD, and for years, he felt that he was never going to be successful because he wouldn't be able to focus. I mean, all of the negative things that come with it. When he realized that it was actually a gift in so many ways, he began to excel. And his biggest message now to the world is don't let any label or diagnosis hold you back. So, yeah, anyway.
Yeah, it's so true. It's one of the things that I struggle with so much, not only like for myself, but also having a daughter, you know, looking at how our society wants to box everyone in. And if it's not comfortable for everyone else, or if you don't fit exactly in that box, then you need to try to fix yourself. Well, that to me is ridiculous. Like we need to start really, like we talk about inclusivity and all of that. Well, we really need to live that. We really need to look at people and see what their gifts and their strengths are and encourage them, you know?
Yeah.
And that goes so strongly in the, you know, the whole educational system and everything. It's like training everybody the same way. And if you don't fit within this, then you're an outsider. And if you're an outsider, then that's not okay. And, you know, it's really, there's so many negative implications on so many levels with that it just, I obviously get very angry and passionate about this because
so do I.
You know, it's like, come on. If everyone was all the same, how boring would that be?
Einstein has the best quote about that. And I sent it to a friend the other day. And just yesterday, I was discussing the mainstream education system, how they expect everybody to be the same, reach all the same standards, and to conform, like to all be like little soldiers. And I don't believe in that either. But what I told him was this quote by Einstein that says, if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, he'll believe his whole life it's stupid or something like that. I don't quote me exactly, but it's the perfect quote that sums that up. Like everybody excels in certain things and obviously has their weak points, right? So I think that we're on the same page about that for sure. What do you feel, Jenna?
Absolutely. And I want to say also, it's just that when I was diagnosed, my doctor's first, you know, his immediate solution was to put me on medications for it. And I did try that for a little while. And I just find like the side effects are much worse than the actual like initial condition, because I'd rather just be who I am. I can navigate my way through this world somehow, but I wish that we could get away from that, get away from seeing like, all right, you're not neurotypical, here's some medicines about it. No, how about we figure out how to thrive without the medications? And I think
Yeah.
To build a support team, a support system where we can talk about these things and laugh about them and not have such a stigma about it. Yeah.
I think that I want to get a little deeper into your journey on the medication and what you went through. But can you go a little deeper into that journey of being diagnosed, then, you know, how you felt before the medication and then being on the medication and then getting off the medication process, if you don't mind, if you're okay with comfortable with talking about that.
I probably would need more time to process it. The medications were a very destructive force in my life. And I don't know fully how to articulate that whole time that I went through, because there's so much. And so I would probably need more time to gather my thoughts on that and put together so I could really describe it adequately, because my brain is in scrambles about it.
No problem. I mean, I just think that it's important that you did mention that it was more destructive than helpful. Now, I don't want to say that maybe some people didn't have a successful, you know, situation with being medicated. I'm sure that's possible. But what I feel, so Jessica, maybe you have some background on this as well, since you know about the Indigo and the ADHD kind of, you know, correlation symptoms and all that. But I read that, you know, 5% of children, they have ADHD, only 5%. And by adulthood, it's 2.5%. So that already shows that a lot of children are being medicated and they're going to grow out of it anyway. And does that medication change who they become?
I think it would be impossible for it not to.
Yeah. Right.
Anytime we're introducing stimulus that's not, well, any stimulus really, whether it is a natural event or, you know, especially pharmaceutical, that's going to change our entire, you know, energetic makeup. It's going to change, which will then, like, you know, change our spirituality and change our, you know, our emotions. And it will, of course, it will definitely have a ripple effect.
Yeah. So is there any diagnostic criteria for, I don't think you would call it that when it comes to being an indigo, but what are the traits of an indigo, where, and how do you calculate this? Where does a person go to figure that out?
Yeah. So, well, usually when people are wondering if they are an indigo or, you know, some different sort of star seed or something along those lines, they tend to be a little bit more at the beginning of their spiritual path and awakening and all of that. And I always find the best thing is really to go within. So really creating that strong connection to yourself so that you can discern what's right for you. You can discern who you are. You can really be fully in your power and connected to your own guidance system. That being said, some of the typical traits of, you know, indigo adults, especially, you know, they tend to question authority. They tend to not ever feel like they fit in. They tend to be very concerned about the state of the world. They tend to be very sensitive and have like psychic or intuitive abilities. They often are very creative. They're a change maker. Like they just but really don't feel like they fit in. There's a lot of tendency to be very passionate and focused about certain things. And then, you know, that's really, it's really like so much of the underlying aspect of it is about, it's almost like coming into this world and realizing like, this is not okay. The systems that we have, all of these negative programmings and all of that, that are running here are not okay. And it's very provoking and frustrating and just maddening, with wanting to feel like you can see all of this wrong, but then you're not really sure how to do it. Not only see, but feel. Like, I know that was a big thing for me along my path. And I know Jenna mentioned how she feels everything so deeply.
Yep.
And that was a really big thing for me for a lot of my life, was really like being so incredibly sensitive that it was like at periods of my life, like I couldn't even really be in crowds, or I couldn't do certain things because it just affected me so intensely. You know, through my spiritual and energetic development, I've been able to strengthen that. And I'm that has shifted a lot. Like, it now feels like it's an asset, as opposed to a liability.
Yeah.
But you know, those are some of kind of the overlying characteristics of indigo adults.
I felt very connected to Indigo myself. You know, when I first learned about it, it's been a bunch of years now, but I also felt like we live in a society that promotes disconnection. You know, I feels like so much of the way that the world works and the systems that are in place, like you were saying, are just out of alignment with what I feel as a spiritual being having to live on this planet, if that makes sense.
So it totally does.
Yeah, I mean, I can very much relate to everything that you're saying. So Jenna, how do you connect to everything she just said about in Indigo? Do you feel, is that your experience as well?
Very similar. There, you know, a few things that I noticed, like maybe some differences, and I just don't know if that's like individual differences between our personalities, but I do generally agree with the passionate creative. I feel like I never fit in. I feel like I must say it 100 times a day, but like I'm in the wrong realm, you guys. You know,
I say it too.
How did I get here?
I do that all the time. How did I get in this dimension? All right, I'm doing it, but what is it?
What are we?
What is happening? But we'll plug along.
Yeah. I feel very connected to both. I'm very fidgety. My mind is like in a million places at once, but I've never been diagnosed. So I've just figured that that's just the way that I am. And I'm very creative, you know. I can jump around all day from project to project. The trouble is, well, I would say the trouble early on was completing a task, but I've learned how to do that over the years, you know? And I feel like if somebody had told me, this is what you have and you need to fix it and take these, you know, take this medication, I really do feel like it would have stifled my creativity for sure.
Absolutely.
And yeah, I mean, I feel like also the diagnosis itself, from what I researched, I was telling you guys, the fact that it can trigger increased depression or anxiety, you know, I think that can happen to anyone, especially because it's part of the human experience to have bouts of depression or anxiety at some point or another. And, you know, allowing ourselves to have those emotions and not, like, sometimes it's the way we view our emotions that is the problem. Like that it's not okay, it's not normal, that it's unacceptable. So what are your thoughts on that, ladies?
Well, something was when you were speaking about the medication, something that was really coming through strongly for me was that, you know, it's like when we really push that on and have like, okay, you need to take this medication in order to fit in and be easier on everybody else. It's really just separating you from your own essence and your own strength even more. And it really, like, to me, like the most important thing, for anybody is to really find their people. It's like finding the others who are here in this incarnation, who are having similar experiences. So you feel the connection, not only with that community, but then also having the connection to yourself and your spiritual aspect and the universe, or whatever you want to call it. Just feels like it is the most supportive thing to really feel more whole and at peace and in alignment with what we're here for. And then yet what is being pushed on us so much, and especially like these poor children, is something that's going to separate us from that even more.
Couldn't agree more. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so I'm sorry, I know that wasn't an answer to your question, but when you were talking, it was like, oh,
No, yeah. It's jump in, interject whenever, and definitely just speak what's on your mind. That's why I didn't want to do a really formal interview, just to get a really authentic discussion happening, about this. What kind of advice would you guys give to someone who, maybe is struggling with ADHD symptoms and it's causing issues in their lives, and who is thinking to go to a mainstream, towards the mainstream medical community for a diagnosis? What kind of advice would you give them?
I just want to jump in real quick, because Jessica's response triggered somewhat of an epiphany in me. I just had a moment where she said to be on medication to kind of make you easier for everyone else. And that hit me kind of hard, because I feel like that's often why people are medicated, because it makes you a little easier to deal with and for other people. And all the while it disconnects you from yourself.
Amazing.
And she said that and it kind of hit me hard. And I just wanted to touch on that. I think that's brilliant. I feel like it does. You get medicated so everybody else can tolerate you and you're a little bit easier, because honestly, to be with me full time, I would imagine would take a lot of patience and understanding and kindness.
Very interesting perspective. I can see your point.
And also look at all of the beautiful things that you have to offer, all of the strength in your emotion and your kindness and this incredible insight that you have.
Yeah.
And thank you. And that's, I think, when we talk about the strengths, that those are the things we need to talk about, and giving advice to people who are struggling with this is medication might be right for some people. I'm not saying that my life choices are the right path for everybody. I'm just, sharing my experiences, but that if you are struggling, maybe just take a moment and write down the top things you struggle with the most, but also make a list of your strengths, things that set you apart from other people, things that make you special, and they're just personality traits, really,
And, they might want to consider something like meditation, where they can practice mindfulness or being in the moment, or hypnotherapy, which can actually literally rewire the brain. So, and also for them to be aware that you may be very likely will be numbing all of your beautiful qualities, like you guys were just saying. In the process of medicating yourself, you're kind of diminishing all of your gifts as well, possibly numbing yourself.
Yeah.
So maybe exploring other avenues before doing, going towards medication. That might be a good piece of advice, right?
Oh, I think you should explore every other avenue before you go to medication. But I do realize that there are times when medications do help people. And if you get to a point where all else has failed, you got to find a way to keep going, and
I agree.
I would explore meditation. I stretch every day, and it sounds so simple, but I plank and I stretch and I just take my time and I just focus on my breathing and I just connect with my surroundings. And that's a big reset for me. And it does me a lot of good.
I have to do the same. I meditate almost every day. I have to. I do spiritual readings, I do hypnotherapy, and I really need a way to let go of some stuff. But on the flip side, I also do kickboxing and actual physical training. And there's something about that that helps me to escape from my sometimes racing thoughts, it makes me focus and be in the moment. So I think there's so many different things, like you were saying, Jenna, like there's not one size fits all for people, but there's a lot of things that you can try before medication, in certain circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Or at least in conjunct, and I think anything that anybody is doing, whether or not they think they have ADHD, have been diagnosed or don't, we live in a culture where we're so much in our heads all the time. And anything that we can do to really get back into our bodies, get back into our hearts and connect into that is going to serve us hugely.
Absolutely. 100% agree. What's helped you, Jenna, aside from the stretching and just, taking your time and breathing? What are some of the other things that you'd say you've gravitated towards since getting off the meds?
I'm still a work in progress over here.
Aren't we all?
Again,
all of us.
I'm all over the place. I don't know. I'm trying to focus on my strengths is where I'm at right now.
I see you doing that. Play your music.
Yeah, I'm really trying to focus on the positivity and the strengths, and the negativity, and it kind of just gets put on the back burner for now.
Great. I think that's probably the best thing you can do, focus on all the things that you can do differently, or hone in on your own skills.
Definitely focusing on what we can. It's and what we can control, and what things that we can do to utilize, who we are and what we need. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you guys feel like, because you feel maybe different than a lot of people, and I think we all kind of do. I mean, we're all so unique, but because creative people are very different, or even very connected people, sensitive people, do you still find at this stage of your journey that you compare yourself to others, like that you need to fit in, or are you completely accepting of your own uniqueness at this point?
I'm at the completely accepting and embracing it, because I don't have another option. I'm not going to fit in.
Love it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I think that there's a human tendency to always, have little moments of comparison. But it's like anything, it's the practice of pulling ourselves back and centering ourselves and connecting back into who we are, to really find that strength and that power, and that loving acceptance of ourselves. So, I am definitely have been in that place for a while. And I also find that there are always new levels of it.
Great answer.
Thank you.
I agree. I mean, I don't feel like, also don't feel like I've ever really fit in. I'm a little, I think especially when we're sensitive people, we feel things very deeply, especially creative people. All creative people are so different in their creativity. But the fact is that they are creators, but we all are. And this system the world that we live in, the systems that are in place, I really feel like a lot of it really doesn't promote us to be the creators that we are, the manifestors that we are. So is there anything that you want to say to people about learning how to hone in on their own creativity and be a manifestor of their own life without caring, what the world thinks about it? How important is that? How can they do that?
Wow. Well, there are so many levels to it. It's, I think, really starting to accept yourself as you are is an important first step. And then really looking at all of the things, so oftentimes it's the things that make other people uncomfortable. We're too this, or we're too opinionated, or we're too whatever. Those are oftentimes our biggest assets. And so that's why they're so strong, right? So
Yeah.
it takes that level of like really looking at those and being able to flip that coin and seeing those for what they're worth. And then just day by day, moment by moment, just continually to bring yourself back in and feel that and, strengthen that. And some of the things you said, meditation, spiritual practices. I really am a strong proponent of people learning about their energetic systems, how to ground themselves, how to clear their own energy, because I find that so incredibly important for being able to access that power and being true to who we are. So, but it definitely comes in layers and stages.
Absolutely. Is there anything else that you guys would add to this discussion, either on the ADHD side or the Indigo side, that you want people to know? Anything that could possibly comfort them, or just anything you want people to know?
It's just, I feel like what's coming through for me right now is hearing like, you are not alone. Like, you are not the only person who feels like this. You are not the only person who's going through this. It's like, advocate for yourself, find the things that work for you, keep looking until you do, find support systems, find your people, find those who you can really like be yourself around and who completely accept and support you in that way. And yeah, you're not alone in this. There are other people who feel very similarly.
I love that. Find your people, find your tribe, because they're definitely out there. When I found my type of people, I actually remember going through a stage where I felt like there were a lot of the people that I was around were just not on the same vibe as me, not on the same page. They were just so very different. And I actually started meditating to bring in like-minded people. And at that point, my whole life started transforming. It was unreal. So, the universe will help deliver what you're asking for, especially when it's in alignment with your spirit. That's what I feel. What about you, Jenna?
Just along the lines of what you were saying just now, that when I invest my energy and I focus on something, I find that my needs are always met. The universe always provides for me. And I find that there's so much peace in that it's the simple things. And when I, put out there for the universe that I need support, or I need love, or I need, the will to get through the day, there always comes a sign. Something always comes along my way and just gives me that little push and gives me a little hope. And I feel like that's important, to just manifest positivity.
Love it.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing. Well, I want to thank both of you so much for sharing your story, number one, and for being a part of this important discussion. And I just appreciate you being on and sharing your personal experience. So thank you.
Well, thanks for having me. This was nice.
You're very welcome. I appreciate it. And I really feel like our messages here today and your experiences can help a lot of people, even with their perspective. So I appreciate you both.
Thank you. Thank you both.
You.
It's been a lot of fun.
I think this helped me too. So
good. Yeah. That's so important. That's so important to me. Perfect. Well, you take care, ladies, and good luck on your journey.
Awesome. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Bye. Thanks, girls.
Thank you for listening to this episode of A Billion Realities with your host, Jessica Gerlach. Visit us online at abillionrealities.com and follow us on social media at A Billion Realities. A Billion Realities is available on Spreaker, iHeartRadio, iTunes, Spotify, Alexa, Reach.tv, or your favorite podcast service. A Billion Realities is a proud member of the HC Universal Network family of podcasts. For more great episodes and content, visit hcuniversalnetwork.com today. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. And until next time, remember, we are all but one of a billion realities.